The moment my son squeezed my hand 3 times under the dinner table, I knew something was wrong. Not kind of wrong. Not maybe wrong. I mean the kind of wrong that hits you in the stomach before your brain even catches up. Because that was our signal. 3 squeezes. It meant, Mom, I'm in trouble. And Brooke hadn't used that signal since he was a kid. It was a normal Sunday dinner. Or at least it started that way. I've kept the Sunday dinner tradition for years now. Even after my husband Rob passed away 8 years ago, I kept doing it. Same table. Same casserole dishes. Same overcooked green beans. If I'm being honest, Brooke used to joke that he only came for the mashed potatoes. I'm Margaret Lawson. By the way, most people call me Maggie. I spent 30 years working as an elementary school librarian before retiring. When you work around kids that long, you develop a habit of noticing small things, tone of voice, body language, the way someone answers a question just a little too carefully. It's not exactly a superpower, but it does make certain things hard to ignore. Like the way my son looked that night. Brooke had called earlier that week. Mom, I want you to meet someone, he said. Now, when your 30-year-old son says that, a mother's brain starts doing math immediately. I tried not to sound too excited. What's her name? I asked. Claire, he said. Just that. Claire. He sounded. I don't know. Flat, maybe. I didn't think much about it at the time, though. Looking back, maybe I should have. Anyway, Sunday came around and right at 6, the doorbell rang. Brooke was standing there with a woman beside him. Mom, this is Claire. She was, well, beautiful. Honestly. Late 20s maybe. Dark hair, neatly pulled back. Very composed. The kind of person who looks like they belong in every room they walk into. She handed me a bouquet of lilies. For you, Mrs. Lawson, she said with a warm smile. Now, I should say this. I actually forgot something earlier when I first started telling this story. Claire didn't just hand me the flowers. She looked around the house first. Just quickly. A fast little glance past my shoulder, like she was taking inventory of the room behind me. At the time I barely registered it. People look around when they enter a house. Still, later on that detail started bothering me. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Dinner started pleasantly enough. I had made pot roast, Brooke's favorite. Claire complimented everything. The house is beautiful. The food smells amazing. You must have wonderful family traditions. All the right things. Almost too right. Brooke sat across from me. Claire sat beside him. And that's when I noticed the first thing that didn't feel normal. Brooke was quiet. Now my son has never been what you'd call shy. As a kid, he talked constantly. Teachers used to tell me they had to move his desk because he'd start conversations with anyone within 5 feet. But that night he barely spoke. Claire did most of the talking. Every time I asked Brooke something, she answered first. So Brooke tells me you worked in a school library, she said. Yes, for about 30 years, I told her. That's wonderful. I love education. Brooke opened his mouth like he was about to say something. Claire placed her hand gently on his arm. Not aggressive. Just a small touch. But he stopped talking. I noticed that. Actually, no. Let me correct that. At the time I didn't fully notice it. I think my brain logged it somewhere quietly. You know how mothers do that. We collect small things without realizing. About halfway through dinner, I reached across the table to pass Brooke the salt. He reached out to take it, and that's when it happened. Our hands touched, and he squeezed. Once, twice, 3 times. Very quick, very deliberate. I froze. For a second I thought maybe it was accidental. But then Brooke looked up at me, and the look on his face, it was the same look he had when he was 12 years old and a group of older boys cornered him behind the school gym. Fear. Trying very hard to stay calm, but unmistakably fear. I didn't react. 30 years around kids teaches you something important. If someone signals for help quietly, you don't blow their cover. So I just smiled and passed him the salt like nothing happened. Claire kept talking about her job. Something in marketing. I think. Or consulting. Actually, now that I think about it, she described it in a way that sounded impressive without ever explaining what she actually did. You know those kinds of conversations. Lots of words, very little information. Then something else happened. Claire leaned forward slightly, and she asked me a question. A very strange one. Mrs. Lawson, she said pleasantly, do you live here alone? The room suddenly felt very quiet. Brooke stopped moving. And for the first time that evening, Claire wasn't smiling anymore. The room went quiet after Claire asked that question. Mrs. Lawson, do you live here alone? It was said politely, calmly, the way someone might ask about the weather. But something about it didn't sit right with me, and I noticed Brooke immediately stopped moving. He had been cutting his pot roast, and the knife just paused in his hand. Now maybe another person wouldn't have caught that, but when you're a mother, you notice tiny shifts in your child's body language, even when they are 30 years old. I kept my voice steady. Well, I said, these days, yes. It's just me, hey. Claire nodded slowly. That must feel very peaceful. Peaceful. That was an odd word choice. Most people say quiet. Or lonely. Or they ask if I mind living alone. Peaceful felt deliberate. But again, maybe I'm reading too much into that moment now. Memory does funny things when you replay events over and over. Still, I remember Brooke looking down at his plate like he suddenly found the mashed potatoes very interesting. Claire picked up her glass of water. And how long have you lived in this house? She asked. Oh, about 25 years now, I said. That's wonderful, she replied. Then she looked around again. Not obviously, just a small glance. Toward the hallway, toward the living room, toward the staircase that leads up to the bedrooms, like she was mapping the place in her head. I told myself I was imagining things. People look around houses all the time. Still, something about it stayed with me. To break the tension, I asked Claire about her work. So Brooke mentioned you work in marketing. She smiled again immediately. Yes, strategic marketing consulting. That was the phrase she used. Now I've been around enough adults to know when someone gives a job description that's a little polished. It sounded like something you'd see on a business card. What kind of companies do you work with? I asked. Oh, all kinds, she said. She took a sip of water. Mostly corporate clients. Corporate clients. Again, very vague. But she said it with such confidence that questioning it further would have felt awkward. Brooke still hadn't said much. Actually, wait. There was something small he did around that time that I didn't think about until later. He kept glancing at his phone. Not checking it, just making sure it was still there beside his plate. Almost like someone might take it. At the time, I assumed he was expecting a work message or something. Brooke works in IT for a logistics company. Sometimes they call him at strange hours. But looking back now, it felt more like reassurance. Like he needed to know the phone was still within reach. A few minutes later, Claire laughed at something I said about the school library. Then she reached across and placed her hand gently over Brooke's again. And something strange happened. Brooke stiffened. It was subtle, but I saw it. His shoulders tightened just slightly. The kind of reaction people have when they are touched unexpectedly. Claire seemed not to notice. Or maybe she did notice. I still can't decide which possibility bothers me more. Then she asked another question. Mrs. Lawson, she said, do you have neighbors close by? Now that one really caught my attention. I forced a small laugh. Oh yes, Linda Harper lives right next door. She's been my neighbor for years. Claire nodded slowly. That's nice. It's good to have someone nearby. Her tone stayed friendly, but Brooke looked up at me for a split second, and I could see it again. That same silent message. Something's wrong. I decided to shift the conversation again. So Claire, how did you and Brooke meet? She answered immediately. At a conference in Chicago. Technology marketing conference, she added. Brooke nodded quietly, but he didn't elaborate, which was strange because Brooke usually tells long stories about everything. In fact, Now that I think about it, he always over-explains how he meets people. It's kind of his habit. But this time, just a nod. That was it. Claire kept talking. It was actually very funny, she said. We kept running into each other at different panels. She told the story smoothly, too smoothly, like she'd told it many times before. But when she finished, I noticed something odd. Brooke didn't react. No smile. No correction. Nothing. He just kept looking at his plate. Dinner wrapped up not long after that. Claire offered to help with the dishes, which was very polite. But I told her not to worry about it. Brooke can help, I said. Claire turned toward him. Of course, she said sweetly. But her eyes lingered on him for a second longer than necessary, and Brooke immediately stood up, almost too quickly, like he didn't want to argue. We carried the plates into the kitchen together. The moment we were alone, Brooke leaned closer to me. His voice was barely above a whisper. Mom. He stopped and glanced toward the dining room doorway. Claire was still sitting at the table, but she was watching us. Not obviously. She was looking down at her phone. Still, I had the very strong feeling she was listening. Brooke swallowed. Then he said quietly, just, don't say anything weird tonight. Okay. That sentence confused me completely. What do you mean? I asked softly, but before he could answer, Claire's voice floated in from the dining room. Brooke, your phone is buzzing. He immediately stepped away from me. When he walked back into the dining room, Claire was holding his phone, which was strange, because I was almost certain it had been in his pocket. When I walked back into the dining room, Claire was standing beside Brooke, holding his phone. She was smiling, but Brooke didn't look happy. Your phone was vibrating, she said casually, handing it to him. I thought it might be important. Brooke took it quickly, too quickly. Their fingers barely touched before he pulled the phone away. Now here's the thing that bothered me later, and I mean really bothered me. I'm almost positive his phone had been in his pocket when we left the table. Not on the table. Not near Claire. In his pocket. But memory can be tricky. I'll admit that. Sometimes our brains rewrite small details after the fact. Still, I remember thinking at that moment, how did she get it? Brooke glanced at the screen and immediately locked it again. No, it's nothing, he said. Claire studied his face for a moment. Just a second. Then she smiled again like nothing was unusual. Good, she said. I hate when work interrupts family time. We finished clearing the table after that. Claire eventually did come into the kitchen, though she didn't actually do much. She mostly stood near the counter and talked. She asked questions about the house. Not normal questions either. More structural ones. How old is the house? Have you done renovations? Are the windows original? Now maybe that sounds harmless. Houses are interesting to people. But the way she asked felt less like curiosity and more like inspection. At one point she even stepped into the hallway and looked toward the staircase. Are the bedrooms upstairs? She asked. Yes, I said. 3 of them. She nodded thoughtfully. Nice layout. Nice layout. That's the exact phrase she used. And again, maybe that means nothing. But it stuck with me. After the dishes were done, we moved into the living room. I made coffee. Claire sat on the couch beside Brooke, very close beside him. Too close, actually. Their shoulders were touching, but Brooke leaned slightly away without seeming to realize he was doing it. That tiny movement caught my attention immediately. People don't usually lean away from someone they are comfortable with, unless something feels off. I should probably explain something here. Brooke and I have always been close. After my husband Rob died, it was just the 2 of us in this house for a long time before Brooke moved out. We developed this quiet understanding between us. The 3-squeeze signal came from when he was little. Rob used to say that if Brooke ever felt scared somewhere, school, a doctor's office, anywhere, he could squeeze one of our hands 3 times. That meant he needed help but couldn't say it out loud. Kids forget things like that. Most people do, but apparently Brooke hadn't forgotten. And now that signal was replaying in my mind over and over while we sat there drinking coffee. Claire crossed her legs and looked around the living room. "You have such a cozy home," she said. "Thank you," I replied. Then she asked something else. Something that made the room feel colder. "Do you usually keep the doors locked at night?" The question caught me off guard. "I suppose so," I said slowly. "It's a safe neighborhood, though." She nodded thoughtfully. "That's good." But she didn't explain why she asked. A few minutes later, Brooks' phone buzzed again. This time it was still in his hand. He glanced at the screen quickly, and I noticed something. His expression changed, only for a second, but it was enough. Concern, maybe even relief. He typed a quick reply. Claire watched him, not his face, the phone. Her eyes were fixed on the screen, like she was trying to see the message. "Work again?" she asked. Brooke nodded. "Yeah." But the answer sounded rushed. Not long after that, Claire stood up. "Well," she said brightly, "we should probably get going." Brooke looked surprised. "Already?" "It's getting late," she said. She turned to me. "Thank you so much for dinner, Mrs. Lawson. It was lovely meeting you." She hugged me politely, but as she stepped back, she looked directly into my eyes. And for a moment, her smile didn't reach them. I can't explain that any better than that. The smile stayed on her face, but the warmth disappeared, like someone flipping off a light. Then it came back just as quickly. "Brooke talks about you all the time," she added sweetly. They walked toward the front door. I followed them to say goodbye. Claire stepped outside first. Brooke lingered for half a second in the doorway, and very quietly, without looking at me, he whispered, "Mom, please don't trust her." Then he stepped outside. The door closed, and I stood there in the hallway for a long time trying to process what I'd just heard. Because my son had just warned me about the woman he was leaving with, and that made absolutely no sense. About 5 minutes later, my phone rang. It was my neighbor, Linda Harper. "Hey Maggie," she said. "I don't want to worry you, but did your son just leave with a woman in a gray sedan?" "Yes," I said slowly. "Why?" Linda hesitated. "Well, that car's been parked on the street outside your house for almost 3 hours." My stomach tightened. 3 hours? "Yes," Linda said. "And Maggie, I could swear someone else was sitting in the driver's seat earlier." When Linda said that, I felt something cold settle in my chest. "Someone else?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "I noticed it earlier this afternoon when I was watering my front plants. Linda Harper has lived next door to me for almost 15 years. She's the kind of neighbor who notices things. Not in a nosy way exactly, more in the way retired people tend to observe the rhythm of their street." "What did the person look like?" I asked. "Well, I couldn't see clearly," Linda admitted. "The windows were a little tinted, but I definitely saw someone in the driver's seat around 4 o'clock. I looked at the clock on my kitchen wall. It was almost 8:30. They were gone when your son and that woman got in the car, though," Linda added. My stomach tightened further. "Are you sure?" "Pretty sure," she said. "When they drove away, I only saw the woman driving." That didn't make sense. Not at all. After I hung up, I walked into the living room and sat down slowly. The house suddenly felt very quiet. Too quiet. For a few minutes I just replayed the evening in my head. Claire's questions. The way Brooke barely spoke. The 3 squeezes of my hand. And then his whisper at the door. "Mom, please don't trust her." That sentence kept echoing in my mind. Now, I tried to think logically. Maybe Brooke was joking. Maybe they'd had a small argument earlier. Couples have strange dynamics sometimes. But that explanation didn't sit right with me. Not after seeing the look on his face at the table. That wasn't irritation. That was fear. I got up and started cleaning the last few dishes from the counter. It gave my hands something to do. Sometimes simple routines help settle your thoughts. But while I was rinsing the coffee cups, something else occurred to me. Claire had asked a lot of questions about the house. Too many, now that I thought about it. The layout, the bedrooms, the locks, the neighbors. Why would someone ask those things during a first dinner visit? Maybe curiosity. Maybe. Still, it felt like she was gathering information, and that thought made me uneasy. Around 9 o'clock, I decided to call Brooke. It rang twice, then went to voicemail. I tried again 10 minutes later. Same result. Now, that wasn't completely unusual. Sometimes Brooke ignored calls if he was driving, but something about the silence tonight made me nervous. I told myself to relax. Still, I texted him. Everything okay? No response. About half an hour later, I was sitting in the living room when my phone buzzed. A message from Brooke, but it wasn't what I expected. It only said 3 words. I'm fine, Mom. No punctuation. No extra explanation. Just that. Now here's something important about my son. Brooke writes full sentences when he texts. Always has. Even as a teenager he used punctuation. It was one of those odd habits he inherited from me, I suppose. So seeing that short message immediately raised a question in my mind. But again, maybe I was overthinking. People text quickly when they are busy. Still, something about it didn't feel like Brooke. I replied, "Did you get home safe?" This time the response came quickly. Yes. One word. That was it. The uneasiness in my stomach grew a little stronger. Now I should mention something here that I didn't think about until much later. Earlier in the evening, when Claire asked about the house layout, Brooke had looked at me in a very specific way. Not just worried. Almost apologetic. At the time I didn't understand why. But that look kept replaying in my mind while I sat there staring at my phone. Around 10:15, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Brooke. But this one was strange. It said, "Did you lock the back door tonight?" I stared at the screen. Why would he ask that? I typed back, "Yes." Why? The typing dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally the reply came. "Just checking." That was all. At this point I felt a small wave of irritation mixed with my worry. I called him again. This time he answered, but his voice sounded different. Quieter. Tight. "Hey, Mom." "Brooke, what's going on tonight?" I asked. "Nothing," he said quickly. "Everything's fine." There was a pause, and in that pause I heard something, a faint sound in the background, like a door closing. Then Claire's voice. Distant. "Brooke, who are you talking to?" Brooke hesitated. "My mom," he said. Another pause. Then Claire spoke again. Her tone was calm, but firm. "Tell her we got home safe." Something about that sentence made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. It sounded less like a suggestion, and more like an instruction. Brooke cleared his throat. "Mom, we got home safe," he repeated. "I figured that," I said slowly. "Brooke, are you okay?" There was another pause. Longer this time. Then he said something that confused me completely. "Mom, did you notice anything strange tonight?" That question caught me off guard. Strange how? But before he could answer, Claire's voice came again. "Closer now. Brooke, the kettle's boiling." Brooke immediately said, "I have to go, Mom." And the line went dead. I sat there staring at my phone, trying to understand what had just happened. And that's when I realized something. Brooke hadn't asked if I was okay. He hadn't asked how the rest of my evening was. The only thing he asked was, "Did you notice anything strange tonight?" About 20 minutes later, I heard something outside. A car slowing down on the street. I walked to the living room window and pulled the curtain back slightly. A gray sedan rolled slowly past my house. Very slowly. The same color Linda had mentioned earlier. The car didn't stop, but as it passed under the street light, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The driver wasn't Claire, and the person behind the wheel was looking directly at my house. The gray sedan rolled past my house slowly, then disappeared down the street. For a moment I just stood there at the window. My first instinct was to tell myself it meant nothing. Cars drive through neighborhoods all the time. Maybe it was someone lost. Maybe someone visiting another house. But something about the way the driver looked at my house bothered me. Not casually, directly, like they were checking something. I let the curtain fall back into place. And for the first time that night, I locked the front door. Then I checked the back door too, just to be safe. Now, I'll admit something here. At that point, I was starting to feel a little ridiculous. Nothing had actually happened. No threats, no crimes. Just strange questions, a nervous son, and a car driving slowly down the street. Still, the uneasiness wouldn't go away. So I decided to call someone. Linda. If anyone had seen that car again, it would be her. She answered on the second ring. Maggie, everything okay? I just saw that gray sedan drive by again. I told her. Oh, Linda said immediately. I was wondering if that was the same one. You saw it too? Yes, she replied. It passed my house about a minute ago. Did you see who was driving? I asked. There was a short pause. Well, not clearly, she said. But I'm pretty sure it wasn't the woman who came to dinner with your son. My stomach tightened again. Did you recognize the driver? No, Linda said. But Maggie, they slowed down right in front of your house. That matched exactly what I had seen. After we hung up, I checked the doors again. Then the windows. I felt a little silly doing it, honestly. But the house suddenly felt more vulnerable than usual. That's something people don't talk about when you live alone. Most days it's peaceful. But occasionally, the silence reminds you there's nobody else in the house. Around 11 o'clock, I decided to go upstairs. I brushed my teeth, changed into my night clothes, and tried to relax. But my mind kept replaying the evening. Claire asking about the locks. Claire asking about the neighbors. Claire studying the layout of the house. And Brooke whispering, Mom, please don't trust her. The more I thought about it, the less sense it made. Why would my son bring someone like that to my house? Unless he didn't have a choice. That thought arrived quietly, and once it appeared, it refused to leave. I was just turning off the bedside lamp when my phone buzzed again. A new text from Brooke, but this one was different. Instead of a normal message, it was a picture, a photo of something. At first I didn't understand what I was looking at. It was dark. The image looked like part of a wall. Then I realized it was a photograph of a notepad, and written on that notepad were 3 words. She's watching me. My heart started beating faster. I immediately called him. The phone rang. Once, twice. Then it connected, but Brooke didn't speak. Instead, I heard something else. Footsteps. Then Claire's voice. Brooke, who are you texting? There was a rustling sound. Then Brooke said quickly, louder this time. Just work stuff. Another pause. Then Claire spoke again. Come sit down. Her tone sounded friendly, but there was something underneath it. Control. Brooke came back to the phone. His voice was low. Mom. I saw the picture. I whispered. There was silence on his end. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. Delete it. Why? I asked. Just do it, he said quickly. Brooke, what is going on? Another long pause. Then he whispered something I almost didn't hear. She's not who she says she is. The words came out rushed, barely audible. Then suddenly I heard Claire again. Brooke, who are you talking to? Brooke's voice immediately changed. I'm finishing a work call, he said. A few seconds passed. Then he spoke into the phone again. But now his tone was different. Careful. Measured. Mom, I'll call you tomorrow. Before I could answer, the line went dead. I sat there in the dark holding my phone. My heart was pounding now, because everything that had felt strange earlier was starting to form a pattern. The questions about the house, the silent hand signal, the nervous texts, the photo message. And now this. She's not who she says she is. I didn't sleep much that night. Around 1:30 a.m., I went downstairs and checked the doors again. Still locked. The street outside looked empty. Quiet. Normal. but something about the silence felt heavy, like the calm before a storm. The next morning, I woke up early. Still no messages from Brooke. No missed calls. Nothing. So I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table trying to decide what to do next. Part of me thought I should call him again. Another part of me thought maybe I should just wait. But then something happened that made waiting impossible. Around 8:15, my phone rang. It was Brooke's childhood friend, Ethan Carter. Now Ethan doesn't usually call me. In fact, the last time he did was probably 3 years ago. So the moment I saw his name on the screen, I knew something was wrong. I answered, "Ethan." His voice sounded tense. "Maggie, I need to ask you something." "What is it?" There was a pause. Then he said, "Did Brooke bring a woman named Claire to your house last night?" "Yes," I said slowly. Another pause. Then Ethan said something that made my stomach turn cold. "Maggie, that's not her real name." For a second I thought I had misheard him. "What do you mean that's not her real name?" I asked. Ethan didn't answer immediately. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, like he was deciding how much to say. "Maggie, the woman Brooke's been seeing, her name isn't Claire." A cold feeling spread through my chest. "Then what's her name?" Another pause. "I think it's Rachel Whitmore," he said. "Rachel?" I repeated. "Yes." My brain struggled to process that. The last name was the same, but the first name had changed. "Are you sure?" I asked. "Well, I'm not 100% sure," Ethan admitted, "but I'm pretty sure." "That's not very reassuring," I said quietly. "I know," he replied. "But Maggie, that's not even the worst part." My stomach tightened again. "Then tell me the worst part." Ethan exhaled slowly. "A couple months ago, Brooke showed me a picture of her. Said he'd just started dating someone new." "That sounds normal enough," I said. "Yeah, except I recognized her." That sentence made my heart beat a little faster. "From where?" "I used to work security for a hotel downtown," Ethan said. "A few years back." "Okay. And there was this incident." He paused again. Now, I should say something about Ethan here. Ethan Carter grew up down the street from us. He and Brooke have been best friends since they were about 10 years old. He's not the kind of guy who exaggerates things. Actually, if anything, Ethan tends to underreact, which made his tone right now even more unsettling. "What kind of incident?" I asked. "There was a guest staying under the name Rachel Whitmore," he said slowly, "and she wasn't actually the guest." My fingers tightened around the phone. "What do you mean?" Ethan hesitated. "Someone reported items missing from their room. Jewelry, cash, small valuables." My heart sank. "And Rachel Whitmore?" I asked. "She had been seen going in and out of several rooms on that floor. So she was stealing." "Maybe," Ethan said. "But that's the strange part." "What is?" "She was never charged with anything. That confused me. If she was caught, why wasn't she charged?" "Well, because when the police showed up, she had already left. Disappeared." I asked. "Exactly." For a moment neither of us spoke. I stared at the kitchen wall, trying to process what he had just told me. "Ethan, are you sure it's the same woman?" "I can't swear to it," he said. "But when Brooke showed me her photo, I recognized her right away." "Did you tell Brooke that?" "Yes." "And what did he say?" Another pause. "He said I was probably mistaken." That didn't sound like Brooke. Not at all. Brooke usually asks 1,000 follow-up questions if something seems suspicious. But maybe Claire had been there when Ethan mentioned it. Or maybe Brooke didn't want to believe it. "Ethan," I said carefully, "when did you last talk to Brooke?" "Yesterday afternoon." "Before dinner?" "Yeah." "What did he say?" "Well, that's actually why I'm calling." My stomach tightened again. "He sounded weird," Ethan said. "Weird how?" "Like he was rushing the conversation. That matched what I had heard on the phone last night." "What were you talking about?" I asked. I asked if he still planned to bring Claire to dinner with you. And he said yes. Did he sound nervous? Not exactly nervous, Ethan said slowly. More like careful. Careful. That word sent a chill through me. Then Ethan said something that made the entire situation feel even stranger. Actually, now that I think about it, there's something else. What? When I asked him where they met, he gave me a completely different story. My stomach dropped. What do you mean different? He told me they met at a coffee shop. That was not the story Claire told at dinner. Claire said they met at a conference in Chicago. Are you sure about that? I asked. Positive. Now my mind started racing. 2 different stories. 2 different names. A mysterious past. And Brooke acting like he was under pressure. None of this felt like coincidence anymore. I stood up and started pacing slowly around the kitchen. Ethan, I need to ask you something. Okay. Do you think Brooke could be in danger? There was a long silence on the phone. Finally, Ethan answered. I don't know. That wasn't comforting. But Maggie, there's one more thing. My stomach tightened again. What is it? Last night, around midnight, Brooke sent me a message. That surprised me. What did it say? Ethan hesitated. Then he said quietly, it just said, if anything happens, check my laptop. My heart skipped a beat. Did he explain what that meant? No. And you didn't call him? I tried, Ethan said. He didn't answer. The room suddenly felt smaller, like the walls were closing in, because now I realized something. Brooke had sent messages to 2 different people last night. To me, she's watching me. To Ethan, if anything happens, check my laptop. That didn't sound like someone who felt safe. Ethan, I said slowly, do you know where Brooke is right now? I assumed he was at home. But I wasn't so sure anymore, because something about Claire's behavior last night had started to feel less like normal relationship tension, and more like control. Just as I was about to say something else, my phone buzzed again. Another text. From Brooke. I opened it immediately, but it wasn't a normal message. It was just a location pin. No explanation. No words. Just a map location. And when I zoomed in on it, my heart started pounding. Because the location wasn't Brooke's apartment. It wasn't his office. It wasn't anywhere I recognized. It was an address on the edge of town. An old industrial area. And right underneath the map pin, Brooke had typed 3 words. Don't come alone. For a moment I just stared at the message on my phone. Don't come alone. Those 3 words made my heart pound harder than anything else Brooke had said the entire night before. Because if someone tells you not to come alone, it means they expect danger. I immediately texted back. Where are you? The message showed delivered, but there was no reply. I looked at the address again. It was on the edge of town, near the old industrial district where a lot of warehouses had closed down years ago. I'd only been through that area a handful of times. Certainly not recently. A cold thought crossed my mind. Why would Brooke be there? And why would he want me there too? I called Ethan back. He answered immediately. Maggie. Brooke just sent me a location, I said. What kind of location? I read him the address. There was silence on the line for a second. Yeah, I know that area, Ethan said. My stomach tightened. What is it? Mostly empty warehouses now, he replied. A few auto shops. Storage buildings. Not exactly comforting. I think he wants us to meet him there, I said. Us? Yes. He wrote don't come alone. Ethan exhaled slowly. Well, I guess that answers that. Now I should probably admit something here. Driving to a deserted warehouse district because your son sends a mysterious message is not the kind of decision most people would make calmly. But when it's your child, logic works a little differently. Still, I wasn't about to walk into something blindly. Ethan, I said, should we call the police? There was a long pause. I'm not sure yet, he admitted. Why not? Because we don't actually know what's happening. That was true. Technically, Nothing illegal had happened yet. Just strange behavior, and a lot of unanswered questions. But the fear in Brooke's voice the night before, that felt real. We decided to meet first. Ethan said he could pick me up in 20 minutes. While I waited, I grabbed my purse and checked my phone again. Still no new messages from Brooke. The house felt strangely quiet again, like it had the night before. I walked to the living room window and looked out at the street. For a moment everything looked normal. Then I noticed something. A gray sedan was parked 2 houses down. My stomach dropped. The same color as the car Linda mentioned. Now, I can't swear it was the same car. A lot of gray sedans exist in the world, but the timing felt wrong. Very wrong. About 15 minutes later, Ethan pulled into my driveway. I stepped outside quickly and got into his truck. "You okay?" he asked. "Not really," I admitted. He nodded. "Yeah, me neither." Ethan started driving toward the industrial district. For the first few minutes, neither of us spoke. Then he said something that made the situation feel even more unsettling. "Did Brooke ever tell you how long he's known this woman?" "Only a couple months," I said. Ethan frowned. "That's weird." "Why?" "Because he didn't mention her at all before that. That actually surprised me. Brooke usually told Ethan everything. So this relationship appeared out of nowhere. I asked, "Pretty much." We reached the industrial area about 20 minutes later. The streets were mostly empty. Old brick buildings, closed factories, a few rusted metal gates. The location pin on my phone showed we were close. "Turn left up here," I told Ethan. He followed the directions. At the end of the street stood a large warehouse building with faded paint and broken windows. The location pin stopped directly in front of it. Ethan slowed the truck. "You sure this is the place?" "Yes," I said quietly. The parking lot was mostly empty, except for one car, a gray sedan. My heart started racing. "That's the same car," I said. Ethan narrowed his eyes. "You sure?" "I'm not 100%, I admitted, but it looks identical." We parked about 30 feet away. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then Ethan said, "Look." A side door of the warehouse was slightly open, and standing just outside that door was Brooke. My chest tightened with relief, but the relief didn't last long, because Brooke wasn't alone. Claire was standing beside her, and another man stood a few feet behind her. A tall man I had never seen before. The moment our truck stopped moving, Claire turned and looked directly at us. Even from that distance I could see it. That same smile she had at dinner. Polite, controlled, but completely empty. Brooke walked toward the truck slowly. I opened the door and stepped out. "Brooke," I said. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept. "Mom, I told you not to come alone," he said. "I didn't," I replied quickly. "Ethan's here." Ethan stepped out of the truck. Brooke nodded slightly. "Good." Then he glanced nervously toward Claire and the man behind her. "They are listening," he said quietly. My stomach tightened. "What is going on?" I asked. Brooke looked at me, and for a moment, the fear I'd seen at dinner returned to his face. Then he said something that made everything suddenly feel much worse. "Mom, she's been using me." Before I could ask what he meant, Claire's voice came from behind him. "Brooke," she said calmly, "you should probably tell your mother the rest." Her tone sounded almost amused, and that was when I noticed something else. The man standing behind her wasn't just watching us. He was holding a phone, recording everything. For a moment, nobody moved. The wind pushed a loose piece of metal somewhere on the warehouse roof, and it made this slow creaking sound above us. I remember noticing that very clearly. Strange the things your brain focuses on when you're scared. The man behind Claire kept his phone pointed at us, recording. I looked at Brooke. "Using me for what?" I asked quietly. Brooke ran a hand through his hair. He looked exhausted, the kind of tired that comes from not sleeping and thinking too much. "She needed access," he said. "Access to what?" I asked. Before he could answer, Claire spoke again. To information, she said calmly. Her voice carried easily across the empty parking lot. She stepped a little closer. That polite smile was still there, but now it looked different. Not friendly, confident, like someone who already knew how the situation would end. Brooke sighed. I work in network security for a logistics company, he said. I nodded slowly. I know that. What I didn't know was why that mattered. Claire folded her arms. Brooke has access to shipping schedules, she said. Warehouse inventories, transportation routes. I felt a slow, sinking feeling in my chest. And I asked. Brooke looked down. They wanted that information. I repeated. He nodded slightly toward the man with the phone. And others. Now things were starting to make a terrible kind of sense. The vague job description, the strange questions about houses, the careful way Claire controlled conversations. She wasn't just Brooke's girlfriend. She had targeted him. I didn't know at first. Brooke said quickly. I swear, Mom, when we started dating I thought she was normal. Claire chuckled softly. That's flattering. Brooke ignored her. But after a few weeks she started asking questions about my work. He continued. What kind of systems we use. How shipments are tracked. And then, I asked. Then she introduced me to him. He nodded again toward the man filming. The man finally spoke. Name's Victor, he said casually. He didn't lower the phone. Didn't even blink. What do you want from us? Ethan asked. Victor shrugged. Nothing from you. He gestured toward Brooke. We already got what we needed. My stomach dropped. Brooke shook his head quickly. No, I didn't give them everything. Claire's smile faded slightly. That wasn't part of the agreement, she said. Brooke looked at her. You never told me the truth about what you were planning to do with the information. Her expression hardened. That wasn't necessary. At that point I realized something. Brooke had called us here for a reason. Why did he send us the location? I asked him quietly. Brooke looked at me, then at Ethan, because I recorded everything. Claire's head tilted slightly. Brooke, she said softly, that would be a mistake. But Brooke kept talking. I figured out what they were doing 2 weeks ago, he said. So I started documenting things. Messages, calls, meetings. Victor lowered the phone slightly. His relaxed expression finally changed. Kid, he said slowly, you should think carefully about what you're saying. Brooke took his phone out of his pocket. This entire conversation is already backed up. He held it up for me to see, in multiple places. For a second, the parking lot went completely silent. Then Claire sighed, actually sighed, like someone annoyed that a meeting was taking longer than expected. You were supposed to be smarter than this, she said to Brooke. Maybe I am, he replied. Ethan stepped forward slightly. So what happens now? He asked. Brooke looked at me, then at Claire. Then he said something I didn't expect. I already sent everything to the police. Victor's jaw tightened. Claire didn't move, but the smile was completely gone now. I should probably mention something here that I realized later. Brooke hadn't actually told them he contacted the police earlier. He waited until we were standing in front of witnesses, until there were more people present, until Victor was already recording. Brooke had set a trap. A distant sound broke the silence. Sirens, faint at first, then growing louder. Victor looked toward the road. Claire closed her eyes for a moment. Not angry, just disappointed. You really ruined a good thing, she said quietly to Brooke. Brooke didn't respond. Within a minute, 2 police cars turned onto the street and rolled into the parking lot. Victor lowered the phone. Claire didn't move. Officers stepped out. Hands where we can see them, one shouted. Victor slowly raised his hands. Claire did the same. Calm, almost bored. As the officers moved in, I finally felt my legs start shaking. The tension that had built up since dinner the night before finally released all at once. Brooke walked over and hugged me. For a second, he felt like he was 12 years old again. Sorry you got dragged into this, Mom, he said quietly. shook my head. You squeezed my hand. I said, that's what the signal is for. He gave a tired smile. Claire was being placed in handcuffs and she looked over at us one last time. You know, she said calmly, this really couldn't work. Brooke didn't answer. The officers led her toward the police car. Victor followed, still silent. Later that day, we learned the full story. Claire, or Rachel, or whatever her real name was part of a group that targeted people with access to profit systems. They built relationships, gained trust, then used that access for theft and smuggling operations. Brooke had realized what was happening before it was too late, and instead of running, he documented everything. That evidence ended up shutting down a much larger operation. I still think about that dinner sometimes. How polite Claire seemed. How normal the evening looked on the surface. And how one small signal, 3 quick squeezes of a hand, changed everything. Because sometimes the people who seem the most perfect are the ones hiding the most. Before I finish, I want to ask you something. If someone you trusted suddenly sent you a silent signal for help, would you notice it? Or would it pass by like an ordinary moment? So that's my story. Folks, if it resonated with you, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Sometimes the smallest signals are the ones that save us.